At World Vision, our mission statement is that our hope for every child is life in all its fullness. And then we recognize, though, that poverty, as you know as well, has underlying global systemic issues. And so therefore we can't just be responding, but we also need to be advocating to try and address the powers and the systemic systems, and that's from individuals to governments. So the second part of our mission statement is, our prayer for every heart is the will to make it so. So our vision, our hope for every child is life in all its fullness. Our prayer for every heart is the will to make it so. We do this, our core areas of concern are food security, water security, health, disasters, conflict and refugees, gender issues, Christian witness, the rights of children, and economic development. However, a thorough and in-depth report by World Vision Australia in May 2009, and really that's where a lot of my comments are based on, and a lot of them are reflected in this document, which is available for you if you are interested in that at the table. This was done by World Vision Australia in May 2009, and the report concluded, and it said, reluctantly, that in its own right and in its capacity to exasperate all other challenges that I've indicated are core values, our core concerns, that climate change constitutes one of the greatest threats ever faced by the poor. Climate change is occurring at a speed and on a scale that will affect not tens of millions of people, but billions, and many of them the poorest people in the world. The study concluded that climate change is fundamentally a development problem and a moral problem, not simply an environmental problem. Anthropogenic climate change has been caused by the past development of today's rich countries, and as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has shown, unless greenhouse gas emissions are cut drastically, it'll be exacerbated by their continued economic growth and by the development of today's poor countries. However, it is the poor in general, and poor children in particular, who are already suffering from climate change and are the most vulnerable. They are the least able to protect themselves from its effects, and they are least able to recover from climatic disasters. They tend to live in the most vulnerable areas, such as low-lying land prone to flooding, or marginal agricultural land that's prone to drought. They are the most vulnerable to the spread of tropical diseases. They are more likely to have to leave their home in search of water or to escape flooding. They are the most vulnerable to the effects of the conflicts that are likely to arise from international tensions over water, energy, and displaced people. So for World Vision, we recognize that climate change will increasingly affect every aspect of our work with the world's poorest people, particularly children. The global food crisis of the recent past has provided a glimpse of how a shock to food prices can rapidly unwind years of hard-won gains in poverty reduction. For the food crisis pushed at least 100 million people into extreme poverty and caused civil unrest in more than 30 countries. But the scale of climate change dwarfs the food crisis. Its impact, particularly on the world's poorest, will be greater. And just a few of examples of this. The United Nations estimates that 14 out of 15 appeals for emergency aid in 2007 were due to climate change. 20 million people were left homeless after climate-related disasters struck with increased frequency in 2008. Small island nations are now beginning to envision a future where they will have to leave the only land they know, unable to stave off rising sea levels. For another year, World Vision, we have been watching desperately as East Africa continues to languish under yet another, the fifth in a row, of a failed rainy season. And in the Huffington Post just a few months ago, it was reported that despondent farmers in India were committing suicide following a prolonged drought during what should have been a monsoon season. The United Nations Development Program has estimated that by the year 2080, climate change could increase the number of malnourished people by 600 million and increase the number of people facing water scarcity by 1.8 billion. From a health perspective, the greatest effect will be endured by low-income countries, and in particular, the urban poor, elderly, and children. And that's what we're looking at in the future, while currently, even now, still today, already 8.8 million children die every year from pretty well preventable, easily preventable situations.